In the 5th year of being with Gerald, we were finally about to get married. Everyone thought I was only sticking around him for his money. I didn't care what others said, my heart and eyes were filled with him. Gerald wasn't a playboy. In the 5 years we were together, I never heard a whisper of him being unfaithful. On the eve of our wedding, I received a call from one of Gerald's friends, saying he was drunk and asking me to come pick him up. Whether it was intentional or not, as I stood outside the private room, I overheard him joking with his friends. "Gerald's such a romantic. That actress just posted on IG that she cut her hand, and he flew over 10 hours just to comfort her. You're getting married soon. Aren't you afraid you won't make it back in time for the wedding?" Gerald's careless laughter came from inside the room. "What do I care? If Antonia wants to wait, we'll get married. If she doesn't, she can leave." The others laughed and flattered him. "You've got such a way with women. You've got this beauty wrapped around your finger. So you're really getting married? Not waiting for your actress anymore?" Gerald's voice was light and teasing. "You know, we broke up because Daphne was too focused on her career to marry. My family needs a new heir. It doesn't matter who I marry. Antonia's the most obedient. She's got no ambition, no drive. She can only rely on me." Another round of laughter followed. I heard Gerald, his voice slurred with alcohol, say, "When she gets here, I'll have her drink and play games with you all." "But isn't your wife allergic to alcohol? Aren't you worried something might happen to her?" "She's just being dramatic," Gerald scoffed. "She can take some medicine for the allergy. If she doesn't have the sense to do that, how does she expect to join my family? If she dares to refuse later, I'll just pour these drinks all over her." It felt like I'd been struck by a blade, my mind buzzing. I had no idea Gerald spoke about me like this behind my back. And no one had ever told me he'd been with Daphne before. I knew Daphne, she was a top-tier actress, someone who'd grown up with Gerald and his circle. She'd occasionally join their gatherings. As I stood there, about to push the door open, a soft cough interrupted me. A man leaned against the doorframe of the adjacent private room, relaxed and composed, a cigarette dangling from his lips, its tip glowing faintly. His features were sharp yet calm, and he raised an eyebrow lazily. "Why bother going in? Let me take you home." It was Harvey, the undisputed heir of one of the most prominent families in the city. While the other wealthy heirs were still under the thumb of their fathers or grandfathers, Harvey had already taken full control of his family's empire, standing at the pinnacle of their social hierarchy. He rarely showed up at the casual gatherings Gerald and his idle friends organized. Tonight, it seemed he was in a private room nearby, handling some business. I followed him downstairs and out of the club. Perhaps because my mind was still reeling, I didn't hesitate to get into his luxury car. The driver asked for my address and drove off smoothly. Harvey and I sat in the back, a seat apart, in complete silence. I was in no mood for small talk, and he, who likely only recognized me in passing, had nothing to say either. When we arrived at my place, I thanked him politely and said goodbye. He responded with a curt nod. As I walked in, Gerald's dog wagged its tail and ran toward me, only to slump back into its bed when it realized it was me. Gerald had had the dog before we got together. I was afraid of dogs and slightly allergic to animal fur. Every time I tried to discuss sending the dog to his parents' house, he'd brush me off, and the conversation would go nowhere. There were times when I couldn't take it anymore and argued with him, but he'd always dismiss it with, "It's just a dog." I thought for a moment, then searched online for Daphne's dog. Naturally, a celebrity like her had fans who'd compiled her past photos. Sure enough, the dog Daphne had frequently carried in her arms 5 years ago was the same one Gerald treated like his own child. I tortured myself by clicking through the fan-curated timeline of Daphne's life. Just 2 days ago, Gerald had said he had an urgent business trip to Paris. I'd even postponed a meeting with a client to rush home and help him pack. Turns out, he'd known Daphne was in Paris for a travel show and had cut her hand while cooking. The $6 million pink diamond necklace Daphne wore around her neck. Gerald had given it to her. I'd seen it in his study drawer, and he'd lied, saying it was a Mother's Day gift for his mom. Daphne's recent movies, which had performed poorly at the box office. Gerald's film company was the primary investor. Every year around Daphne's birthday, Gerald would find an excuse to travel. Looking back, I realized he'd always been unusually upbeat during those times. I called Gerald on video. He was still at the club, his face flushed, his eyes unfocused, his speech slurred from drinking. "Didn't I tell you to come pick me up?" Gerald snapped. "Are you ignoring me now?" It was only then I remembered I'd left the car at the club. But it didn't matter, it was Gerald's car anyway, and I didn't want it anymore. "Come quick, he's drunk," his friends chimed in. "Everyone's here," I said with a smile. "That's good." I was worried he'd be too drunk to remember tomorrow morning. "Make sure you all help him remember this." "Gerald, we're breaking up." "What do you mean?" Gerald frowned, his tone impatient. "I just stood you up for dinner tonight. What are you making a fuss about? After 5 years, it's better we cut our losses and stop wasting each other's time." Gerald's expression darkened. "Fine. Don't regret it." The video call fell silent, even the background music had been turned off. "Of course I won't. Sorry to ruin the fun. Keep enjoying yourselves." "Gerald, I hope you find someone better, though I doubt you ever will." "If you've made me suffer, Gerald, I won't let you off easy." After hanging up, I blocked him and left all the group chats we were in together. Within minutes, the only friend I had in that circle texted me. "What's going on? They're saying you and Gerald broke up? Weren't you about to get married?" "We really broke up. No wedding." As I packed a few essentials, I replied to her. "These people are awful. They're betting in the group chat how long it'll take for you to come crawling back." She sent me a screenshot of the chat. "Antonia would never give up on a rich guy like Gerald. How long do you think she'll take to beg him back? 3 days? I bet, before the wedding, 5 days. Gerald, 2 days max. She'll come back begging once she's done throwing her tantrum." I smirked bitterly. How much fake alcohol had he drunk? There wasn't much to take. We hadn't lived together long, and most of the clothes here were for the wedding. The custom-made wedding dress hung prominently in the walk-in closet. I'd dreamed of wearing it for years, but now I never would. Maybe I should just burn it, I thought, staring at the dress. Instead, I left Gerald a note. "Leave the dress and the ring for your first love. You can adjust the size, no need to waste it." I took off the engagement ring, placed it on the jewelry tray, left the keys, and walked out without looking back. I planned to stay at a hotel for a couple of days, before breaking the news to my parents. As I reached the building's entrance, I saw Harvey was still there. The driver wasn't in the car. Harvey leaned against the vehicle, a cigarette between his fingers, its tip glowing faintly. His suit jacket was open, exuding a lazy elegance. When he saw me, he squinted and stubbed out the cigarette on the car's hood. The driver had something to attend to. "I'm just here sobering up." I nodded awkwardly. "Can you drive? Could you take me back?" I couldn't refuse. As I drove, I stole glances at Harvey, who was resting with his eyes closed in the passenger seat. His features were striking yet not harsh, his demeanor reserved yet profound. His tie was stuffed into his pants pocket, and the top buttons of his shirt were undone, revealing a hint of his refined collarbone. I wondered why he hadn't called someone else to drive or even hired a chauffeur. Why had he waited 2 hours outside just to sober up? "Antonia," Harvey's lips curved slightly, his voice carrying a hint of fondness. "Has no one ever told you not to peek with those big eyes of yours?" I flushed and shot him a reproachful look, before focusing on the road. I was surprised he even knew my name, given how little we'd interacted. When we arrived at Harvey's villa, I parked the car in the garage and got out, planning to call a taxi to the hotel. But before I could, footsteps approached from behind. A strong, slender hand gripped my arm and turned me to face him. The sudden closeness made my breath hitch. The scent of alcohol wasn't unpleasant. I instinctively stepped back. "You're drunk." Harvey's dark eyes fixed on me, and he nodded, slowly. "A little." He didn't let go. If anything, his grip tightened as I tried to retreat. "Antonia," his voice was hoarse. "Do you remember what you said to me on my birthday that year?" My heart was racing now. "You said you wanted everything to go smoothly, for things to fall into place." Harvey's eyes, like black obsidian, burned with an intensity he couldn't hide. "Be with me. I can make that happen." The birthday Harvey mentioned was the first time I'd met him. I'd been busy preparing for my thesis defense the next day, but Gerald had kept texting me, insisting I come to the club for a gathering. He'd even called, his tone impatient. "Don't be difficult. Everyone's waiting for you." I heard faint laughter in the background. After a moment of silence, I gave in. When I arrived at the club, Gerald, unusually, came down to meet me. He frowned at my casual outfit, a hoodie and jeans. "Why are you dressed like this? I told you there was a gathering tonight." When I didn't respond, he kissed my cheek as if to placate me, then slid his arm around my waist and led me into the private room. Gerald wasn't the type to show affection in public, so when we walked in, everyone crowded around, teasing us. Gerald looked around, a hint of pride in his expression, and asked, "Has Harvey arrived yet?" "Who's that?" I whispered, though I had a guess. In this city, there was only one person worth this much fuss, from a group of arrogant heirs. The guest of honor. Harvey. Don't upset him. Even his grandfather can't control him in the family. We waited for a while, drinking and chatting, until the birthday boy finally showed up. He looked busy, still dressed in formal attire from some event. Harvey acknowledged the greetings with a detached glance and sat down to play Texas Hold'em. Daphne was there too, hovering near Harvey as he played. He casually pulled a cigarette from a pack and put it between his lips. Daphne immediately leaned in to light it for him, but he frowned and didn't accept, switching the cigarette to his other hand instead. Daphne awkwardly withdrew, then poured a glass of wine and returned, her voice soft and sweet. "It's your birthday. Let me toast you." She pressed herself against his arm, her body languid and seductive. Harvey didn't move away, but he didn't take the glass either. His expression remained indifferent, his eyes not even glancing at her. The room fell silent. With Harvey's status and his notoriously aloof demeanor, he didn't owe anyone any courtesy. The ignored actress eventually excused herself and left. Someone nearby snickered. "That actress thinks too highly of herself. No matter how hard she tries, she can't win Harvey over." Every time there's a gathering with Harvey, Daphne drops everything to come. She says she just wants to hang out with everyone, but we all know her real motive. Harvey's family isn't something just anyone can marry into. I wonder what kind of girl could ever capture Harvey's attention. Gerald had been holding me, his expression unreadable as he drank. Suddenly, he patted the back of my hand and said firmly, "Antonia, go toast Harvey." The room fell silent. Those who knew Gerald well were stunned, then started egging me on. I froze. Even I could tell Gerald was mocking me. Daphne, a celebrated actress, had just been publicly ignored by Harvey. Now he wanted me to approach him? What was he thinking? Even if alcohol had clouded his judgment, he shouldn't be using me as entertainment for his friends. Besides, he knew I had a mild alcohol allergy. Drinking always left me with a rash the next day, itchy and uncomfortable. Despite my reluctance, Gerald pushed me forward, his tone affectionate but firm. "Be a good girl, darling. Do this for me. Everyone's watching." I didn't want to make a scene in front of everyone, so I swallowed my embarrassment and walked toward Harvey with a glass in hand. I knew they were all waiting for a show. Gerald didn't care about my dignity, treating me like a clown for their amusement. At that moment, even though I knew Gerald and I were in an equal relationship, to everyone else, it looked like I was just a gold digger, and he was merely toying with me, never truly valuing me. Trembling, I approached Harvey, unsure of what to say. I shakily raised my glass. "Harvey, a toast to you." Harvey remained seated, his posture relaxed. When he looked up at me, his long lashes partially hid his cold, indifferent eyes. I was terrified. This was a man who'd just coldly dismissed a top actress. What was I doing, setting myself up for humiliation? Someone nearby introduced me. "This is Gerald's girlfriend." Harvey nodded slightly and gestured toward the table. "Put it there." I didn't understand and stood there, frozen. He seemed to smirk faintly, then stood up, took my glass, and placed it on the poker table. He picked up his own glass and asked me, "What do you want?" I thought he was asking what I wanted to say, so I replied, "May everything go smoothly, and may the timing be right." Harvey chuckled, raised his glass, and downed the drink. "All right," he said simply. Harvey eventually called his driver to take me to the hotel. He came along too. We sat in the back, still a seat apart, and he continued to rest with his eyes closed. But this time a faint smile lingered on his lips. The driver looked familiar, and it took me a while to remember where I'd seen him before. It was at Harvey's birthday party, when Gerald had publicly handed me a room key and told me to wait for him upstairs. I'd been shocked and, unable to hold back my anger, grabbed my things and walked out. Gerald hadn't followed me, but as I waited for a ride downstairs, a staff member approached and offered to drive me back to school. "Antonia, the boss asked me to take you back." "Is it Gerald?" I'd asked. "Let's go, Antonia," the man had replied without answering directly. At the time, I'd thought Gerald had realized he'd gone too far but couldn't leave the party, so he'd sent someone to make amends. Later, he'd just shown up at my school with a bouquet of flowers, claiming he'd been too drunk to think straight, and I'd forgiven him. Seeing Harvey's driver now, I realized it hadn't been Gerald who'd tried to send me home that night, it had been Harvey. When we arrived at the hotel, I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out of the car. Harvey followed me. He had insisted on bringing me to one of his hotels, and after helping me check in, he politely said goodbye. "Get some rest. I'll pick you up tomorrow morning and take you to work." As I thought about all the things Gerald had done over the years, his hot and cold behavior, his lack of love, his lies, I felt a sudden impulse. "Do you want to come upstairs with me?" I asked. Harvey smiled, took my hand, and gave it a gentle squeeze. "That's not why I'm here. Go on up, okay?" I hesitated, then grabbed his hand and stared into his eyes without saying a word. "Antonia," Harvey said, his voice hoarse, his usually indifferent eyes filled with unmistakable desire. "Don't provoke me." In the elevator, my heart was pounding so hard I thought it might leap out of my chest. It might sound unbelievable, but in the 5 years I'd been with Gerald, we'd never gone beyond kissing. I'd even felt grateful, thinking Gerald was different from the others in his circle, that he respected me too much to push for more. Now, it seemed laughably ironic, he'd been saving himself for Daphne. But I wasn't going to save myself for him. What was over, and there was no turning back. Besides, Harvey was an absolute catch. I wouldn't regret this. As soon as we entered the room and before I could even turn on the lights, Harvey pulled me into his arms. His kiss was sudden and intense, leaving me breathless and my mind blank. My breathing quickened, and my head spun. I tried to push him away, but he pinned my hands against the wall above my head, interlacing our fingers. "I need to borrow your bathroom," he murmured against my neck after a while, his voice rough. I blushed furiously, but couldn't help asking, "Aren't we going to continue?" "I'm in no rush," he said, hugging me and kissing my cheek. "Don't act out of spite. I won't let you do anything in the heat of the moment that you might regret later. Don't worry, I'm here whenever you need me. You'll be mine eventually." The wedding Gerald and I had planned was supposed to take place that Saturday. On Friday evening, photos of Daphne returning to the country flooded social media. In the pictures, she wore large sunglasses that hid most of her face, but her smile looked forced, and she appeared unusually thin, surrounded by bodyguards. The media speculated that she was nursing a broken heart. Was she coming back to take my place? Gerald called me using a friend's phone. "Where are you?" "I'll pick you up for the final fitting." "Wrong number?" "This is Antonia." At the time, I was curled up in Harvey's home theater, watching a movie. Hearing Gerald's voice, Harvey playfully bit my finger, clearly jealous. "Stop messing around," Gerald said, trying to keep his temper in check. I was wrong this time. "Don't be mad. Didn't anyone tell you we broke up?" "Antonia." Gerald lost his patience. "Enough is enough. The wedding's tomorrow. Everyone's coming. My family can't afford this embarrassment." I sneered. Now that the wedding was missing a bride, he remembered me? But wasn't his first love back? "Go find your celebrity. Isn't she the spokesperson for your company? You two should just get married and save on advertising," I shot back. Gerald paused. "They were just joking. Daphne and I broke up a long time ago. We're just friends now. I didn't tell you because I thought it might make you uncomfortable." He was trying to smooth things over with lies again, but this time I wasn't going to fall for it. "That's none of my business anymore. I'm with someone else now." "What?" Gerald was furious. I'm giving you one last chance. Don't. Harvey had heard enough. He took the phone from me. Let me say it again. My girlfriend is busy tomorrow. Then he hung up and tossed the phone onto the couch, giving me a look that clearly said, "How did you ever end up with someone like that?" I awkwardly rubbed my nose. Everyone makes mistakes when they're young. Over the years, my friends had often told me I was being manipulated by Gerald. But we'd had good times too. He'd once been like a beacon of light to me. During my senior year of college, I'd entered a major design competition, only to have my work plagiarized by a classmate. Reporting her could have gotten her expelled and ruined her career. While I was hesitating, she fabricated evidence to accuse me of plagiarism. I'd waited outside the organizer's office, desperate to clear my name, when Gerald appeared. To me, a regular college student, he'd seemed like a hero sent from heaven. He'd taken my hand and led me out of that mess. Even though I knew the gap between our statuses was vast, and that our habits and values would inevitably clash, Gerald had seemed different. His relationships were simple, and he respected and cared for me. To me, he'd been kind and gentle. I couldn't help but fall for him. I'd loved him, that was true. I remembered the drone light show when he confessed his feelings. I remembered every anniversary and date, the surprises he'd spring on me. I remembered him staying by my side all night in the emergency room when I was sick. But letting go was also true. Because he wasn't just my hero. When another woman needed him, he could be her Superman too. Harvey's voice was unmistakable, and Gerald recognized it immediately. The next day, he showed up at my studio. "How did you end up with Harvey?" Gerald blocked my path, looking agitated. "None of your business. I know you're mad about Daphne, but I explained it to you. Our circle is complicated. Yes, we used to date, but we broke up. Our families are closely connected, I can't just cut her off. Besides, I'm marrying you. Don't you understand that you're more important to me? Can't you be a little understanding and stop making a scene?" How laughable. He was the one entangled with his ex, yet he made it sound like I was the unreasonable one, like I was the one with jealousy issues. "Do you think you're so confident now because you have Harvey, and he's better than me? Wake up. He's just playing with you. Harvey's the type who gets whatever he wants. He's just trying to take what's mine. He's only interested in you because of your looks. Do you really think someone like him could genuinely like you? Or do you think you're so irresistible that a man of his status would be interested in his friend's girlfriend?" I didn't argue. I wanted to see how far Gerald would go. It was strange, I should have been furious, heartbroken. But the pain had already faded when I decided to break up with him. I'd long realized he had no real feelings for me, so why would he care about my dignity? So why did I still feel this lingering ache? I stood there, stunned, not even noticing when Harvey arrived. He stepped in front of me, shielding me. "Since when are you my friend? Do you think I'd ever attend your gatherings if it weren't for her? I gave you a chance, Gerald. She's been my treasure for 7 years. You didn't cherish her, and now I won't let her go." Harvey led me to a restaurant, like a puppet master, guiding a marionette. It wasn't until he sat me down and ordered that I finally snapped out of my daze. Could someone like him really have genuine feelings? Gerald's circle had been hard enough to navigate, let alone someone as high up as Harvey. Did he not care about my past with Gerald because he saw me as just a plaything? He'd told me to be with him, but he'd never said what that meant. Did he just want to keep me as a mistress? Life had taught me enough lessons. I wasn't young anymore, and I didn't have the courage to spend another 5 years falling into another abyss. But Harvey had said I was his treasure for 7 years. Did we? I didn't know how to start. "You want to ask if we've met before, right?" Harvey smiled knowingly. "You can't seriously have no memory of me at all." I looked at him, confused. 7 years ago, my family donated a library to your school. I was the representative at the ceremony. You were one of the ushers, standing behind me. You even gave me a throat lozenge, he explained. I remembered that event. The person in front of me had been coughing nonstop, and I'd worried it would disrupt the ceremony, so I'd handed him a lozenge. As for what he looked like, I hadn't paid attention. All I was thinking was, if you guys didn't hurry up, I'd miss lunch, I admitted, embarrassed. Guess I wasn't as important as a meal. I know what you're thinking. Listen, Harvey said, his gaze intense and sincere, a smile playing on his lips. I fell for you at first sight. If you think it was just about your looks, that's fine too. I've liked you for 7 years. I didn't pursue you back then because my family was going through some internal issues, and I had to go abroad. My position was unstable, so I couldn't risk involving you. When I came back, ready to find you, you were already with Gerald. I didn't want to ruin what you had, so I kept my distance. The rest you know, I finally couldn't hold back anymore. Don't doubt it. I'm really busy. I don't have time to hang out with those idle rich kids. Every time you saw me at a gathering, it was because I couldn't stand not seeing you anymore. I've said my piece. Do you have any questions for me? Harvey's eyes reflected me clearly. I couldn't process everything he'd said, but it was impossible not to be moved. Still, could I really trust him? Harvey, I might not be able to jump into a new relationship right away. That wouldn't be fair to you. I understand. I just need you to give me a chance to pursue you, Harvey said, taking my hand on the table. Don't belittle yourself. I won't let anyone disrespect you. In the following weeks, many old friends updated me on Gerald. Daphne had rushed back, thinking Gerald was getting married, and had tearfully confessed her regrets. But Gerald didn't seem to take her back. People speculated that she'd been stringing Gerald along all these years, hoping to marry Harvey. Now that Harvey was out of reach, she was trying to latch onto Gerald. Gerald had been a mess lately, neglecting work and ending up in the hospital multiple times due to heavy drinking. I received countless late-night calls from him, his voice choked with tears, begging me to forgive him. I never responded, just hung up and blocked each number. Then Harvey would pull me into his warm embrace, kiss my shoulder, tuck me in, and gently coax me back to sleep. I'd never told Harvey that Gerald and I had never been intimate. So the first time with Harvey, I was trembling with nerves. Surprisingly, he seemed just as nervous, constantly asking if I was okay. I bit his shoulder, who felt good their first time. When it was over, I cried, and he held me, kissing me softly. I love you, Antonia. I really do. Harvey also took me to some gatherings. I knew his circle didn't overlap much with Gerald's, but many of the people close to Harvey had seen me at other events, back when I was Gerald's girlfriend. I'd prepared myself for the awkwardness, but everyone was surprisingly kind. No snide remarks. It was clear how much Harvey cared for me. What I didn't expect was that the harshest words would come from Gerald himself. One day, while we were happily chatting at a gathering, the door burst open. A staff member frantically apologized for the intrusion. Gerald stood in the doorway, his cold gaze landing on Harvey and me, cozy on the couch. Harvey, he sneered. Is playing with someone else's cast-offs especially fun? The room fell silent. One of Harvey's friends threw a glass. Gerald, don't be an ass. Harvey, care to share? How does Antonia taste? Gerald continued, his tone dripping with sarcasm. From the moment Gerald appeared, I felt like I'd been plunged into an icy abyss. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms, trying to distract myself from the anxiety. For the first time, I regretted wasting 5 years on someone like him. I could handle being humiliated, it was my fault for not seeing him for who he was. But Harvey didn't deserve to be disrespected like this, because of me. Don't worry. I'm here, Harvey whispered, pulling me into his arms. What do you want? He asked Gerald, his voice cold and warning. Let's make a bet. You choose the stakes. If I win, I take her. If I lose, she's yours, and I'll never bother her again. But since you've touched my woman, you'll apologize to me. You think you're worthy of betting with me? Harvey's expression turned icy. Have I been too lenient with you, making you forget who I am? He stood up, cracking his knuckles. I don't even need to dirty my hands dealing with you. Everyone here works for me. I could end you today, and no one would know. But I'll let you lose fair and square. Harvey glanced at Gerald, then covered my eyes with his hand. Close your eyes. Don't look. I felt his hand leave my face, and the sound of punches followed. Against his advice, I opened my eyes and watched as Harvey coldly beat Gerald. Don't think I owe you anything. I've held back long enough. You didn't cherish her. Don't blame me. Gerald did try to fight back, but he was no match for Harvey. It was essentially a one-sided beating. Harvey's eyes were cold and terrifying, and his hands showed no sign of stopping. I hated Gerald so much. Once, he had been everything to me, but he had lied to me, belittled me, and humiliated me. I thought that even if he died in front of me one day, I wouldn't feel a thing, I might even applaud. But not like this. At least not with Harvey being the one to do it. I was terrified that Harvey might go too far, that he might lose control. Even though my legs were weak with fear, I forced myself to rush forward and wrap my arms tightly around Harvey's waist from behind. Stop. Harvey paused, startled, and slowly released Gerald. He turned around and pulled me into his arms. Seeing my tears, he immediately softened his voice to comfort me. Don't be scared, baby. As soon as Gerald was free, he swung a punch at Harvey's face, not caring that I was still in Harvey's arms. Harvey shielded me, taking the hit without dodging. When Gerald tried to strike again, I broke free from Harvey's embrace and slapped Gerald hard across the face. Gerald, are you even a man? Don't stoop so low. Gerald froze, his strength draining away as he wiped the blood from his mouth and stared at me. But I didn't have a single glance to spare for him. My eyes were red from crying as I carefully touched Harvey's injured lip, asking through tears if it hurt. I didn't notice when Gerald left the room. I didn't think I'd ever see him again. Not long after, one of Gerald's friends called me, begging me to ask Harvey to let Gerald go. That's when I found out that Harvey had been systematically dismantling Gerald's life. He'd first taken several crucial projects from Gerald, then, as Gerald's company's stock plummeted, Harvey had bought up shares until he gained control of the company. When I asked Harvey what he was doing, he simply said, "Adults have to face the consequences of their actions." I just wanted to make you feel better. Seeing my hesitation, he smiled and pulled me into his arms. Don't worry. I know what I'm doing. His grandfather has come to beg me several times, saying the family will disown Gerald. I'm not interested in their company. I just wanted to give you some justice. At the very least, Gerald should apologize to you. I buried my face in Harvey's chest, mumbling, I don't need his apology. I never want to see him again. Harvey kissed me and reassured me, then you won't. I didn't want to dwell on people and things that no longer mattered. Now, every day was filled with happiness and surprises. Harvey told me I was his one and only, his most precious treasure in the world. This man, who had always been so untouchable, treated me with the utmost patience and gave me the most profound love. About half a year into our relationship, I got the opportunity to study at the best art school in Country A for a year and a half. Harvey was fully supportive. After I arrived, he flew to see me every 10 days, sometimes just to have dinner with me and spend the night before rushing back to City B at dawn. Then, halfway through my studies, I found out I was pregnant. It must have happened during a weekend trip to the beach. The scenery was beautiful, the mood was perfect, and I'd let him have his way. By the time I remembered, it was already past the 72-hour mark. I told myself it wasn't that easy to get pregnant, but I still had to confront the culprit. When Harvey got the call, his usually calm voice rose with excitement. He booked the earliest flight to come to me, bringing with him the engagement ring he'd already custom-made. He knelt before me, his eyes red. All those years, the moments we crossed paths were fleeting for you, but for me, they were 1,000 heartbeats. I love you. I want you to be mine, but more than that, I want you to be yourself, never compromising for anyone. I don't need you to give up your studies because of this unexpected pregnancy. If you're willing to have the baby, the best medical team will be with you every step of the way. If you don't want to, that's okay too. It's my fault for not protecting you better. But before that, I want you to marry me. I've waited 8 years. I can't wait any longer. Antonia, will you marry me? Our wedding was held in an ancient church. We exchanged eternal vows, blessed by the priest and surrounded by our closest family and friends. Before I tossed the bouquet, I saw Gerald in a corner of the churchyard, holding a familiar wedding dress, watching my wedding from afar, his expression desolate. He had once made vows to me too, and I had believed, in that moment, that he meant them. But later, he broke those vows, making me feel like I deserved to be treated as worthless. Until I met Harvey, who told me I was his one and only, his beautiful, irreplaceable treasure. He made me believe again that I was worthy of love, that I would never be betrayed again. Gerald's side story. I think I might be the only one who knows Harvey's secret. That time his family donated a library to a university. A group of us university alumni got together for a party. Harvey was in a great mood that night. Not only did he stay the whole time, but he also got drunk, something rare for him. In the early hours of the morning, while I was still somewhat sober, I saw Harvey's phone screen. Even in his drunken state, I could tell from the way he looked at the photo, his thumb gently brushing the screen, his eyes filled with tenderness, that the girl in the picture was someone he loved. It looked like a candid shot, probably taken during the donation ceremony. The girl had a sweet, innocent kind of beauty. Not my type, I preferred someone more glamorous, like Daphne. But seeing Harvey like this, I realized this was how he looked when he was in love. Over the years, everyone knew Harvey never gave any girl a second glance. But that night, I saw a different side of him. Not long after that party, Harvey went abroad. When he returned, he took full control of his family's business. The gap between him and the rest of us grew wider. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that even our fathers had to show him respect when speaking to him. It was around this time that Daphne broke up with me, saying the entertainment industry wasn't conducive to marriage. But I knew the real reason: Harvey was back. My parents weren't particularly influential in the family, and Daphne was ambitious. Naturally, she wanted to climb higher. Since we were kids, it seemed like all the girls were drawn to Harvey, who ignored them. But why? Aside from his birthright, what made him so much better than me? So when I first met the girl from Harvey's phone, I recognized her immediately. Seeing her crying helplessly outside Harvey's company, I reached out to help her. The thought of beating Harvey at something consumed me. If the girl Harvey secretly loved became mine, how would he react? Would I finally have one? The most ridiculous part was that to help Harvey's beloved clear her name, I had to ask Harvey for help. I went to him one day, saying a girl had been wronged in a competition his company was hosting. Harvey, who was casually scrolling through his phone, glanced at me indifferently. "Since when do you have such a soft heart?" "I'm busy. I don't have time for this." I deliberately pulled up a photo I'd taken of Antonia crying. "Come on, Harvey. I promised her I'd help. I can't just sleep with her and leave her hanging." Harvey gave me a dismissive look, but it was enough for him to recognize the girl in the photo. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. For once, I felt like I'd won. I always thought I didn't like Antonia's type. My type had always been Daphne, and that never changed. At first, I dated Antonia just to see the look of defeat on Harvey's face. I wanted him to see how the girl he loved was now devoted to another man, how she obeyed and submitted to me. For a while, I took great pleasure in bringing Antonia to all sorts of gatherings. Even if Harvey wasn't there, I wanted him to hear from others how the girl he loved now had eyes only for me. Even if people called her a gold digger, she didn't care. So when Harvey's birthday came around, I made sure to organize a party and insisted Antonia attend. I didn't expect Harvey to publicly ignore Daphne, but I wasn't about to let that slide. I wanted him to see that Antonia was my girlfriend, that she would do whatever I asked, no matter how humiliating. I deliberately handed Antonia a room key in front of everyone, even though I knew it was despicable. When Antonia left, I didn't go after her. I wanted Harvey to see her humiliation. I always thought the only person I loved was Daphne. So during those years with Antonia, whenever Daphne needed me, I was there. I enjoyed Antonia's complete trust and dependence on me while secretly seeing Daphne behind her back. I wasn't without guilt, but the thrill of being with Daphne was something Antonia couldn't give me. When Antonia broke up with me, I panicked for the first time. I knew I was a scumbag, unable to let go of Daphne but unwilling to lose Antonia. But it was only then that I realized I had no desire to marry Daphne, even though she was willing to give up her career to be with me. What I truly wanted was to see Antonia in that wedding dress, saying "I do" in front of everyone. I regretted it. I wanted her back. I thought the breakup was just her way of making me grovel, but Antonia was serious. And I never expected Harvey, proud and untouchable as he was, to step back for Antonia's sake. Even after I'd said those things to him, he didn't care. The day Harvey and I fought at the club, I realized the girl who once had eyes only for me no longer looked my way. Her eyes were only for Harvey now. The scratch on Harvey's face was nothing compared to my injuries, but in that moment, Antonia didn't spare me a single glance. She just kept crying, asking Harvey if he was okay. All I got was a hard slap. Did it hurt? Yes. My heart hurt so much I thought it might stop. I had finally lost the girl who once loved me with all her heart. Harvey eventually let go of my family's company on the condition that I leave City B and never appear in front of Antonia again. My family exiled me abroad, stripping me of all rights to the family business. I was left with nothing. All my friends, knowing I'd crossed Harvey, avoided me like the plague. On what would have been my and Antonia's first wedding anniversary, I heard she was studying abroad. I went to great lengths to find her address. When I knocked on the door, Harvey answered, wearing only sleep pants, his bare chest and sleepy eyes glaring at me. My wife is pregnant. She's still asleep. What do you want? From inside, I heard Antonia's sweet, sleepy voice. Who is it? I turned and fled, defeated. I went to Antonia's wedding, hiding in a corner of the church like a thief, stealing glimpses of the happiness that could have been mine. My girl, who had once dreamed of our future in my arms, now stood in the church she'd always wanted, the sunlight streaming through stained glass, flowers everywhere. Harvey had made her dream come true. I watched the girl I loved become the most beautiful bride in the world, watched her say, "I do," through tears as Harvey kissed her. My throat tightened, bitter and dry. If I could go back to that night, I would never let any of this happen. I know Antonia saw me, but her gaze didn't linger. Her expression didn't change, as if I were a stranger. And why would it? From now on, she would have the happiest, most beautiful future. And I'd turned my life into a joke. It was all my own doing. The end.